Okay, sounds good.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Rob Watson. I'm a web professional since about 1986. I've been a space enthusiast since I can first remember. I have far more background in web development than in space stuff, but I did help for a short period of time when I was a college freshman at Utah State University with the Hearts in Space experiment that flew eventually on STS-95. I think that was October 1998. And that was when Senator John Glenn went to space again on the shuttle. So that little project, I contributed, like maybe 7 or 8 months of worthy work, I guess, just, doing research and figuring out how we're going to build this thing. And then some other people after me built it and it flew. But that's my little lame claim to fame on that. But in 2016, I moved to near the Space Coast in Florida with my family. And we like to go out and see the launches at the Cape. And I also volunteer with MarsInitiative.org to help them build their website at this time. So, but yeah, that's a little bit about me.
That's awesome. I didn't quite catch the year that you started with the web development. Could you tell me that again?
Yeah, it was 1996.
1996. Okay, my mind did one of those bit flip things. I thought I heard 1986. I was like, "Whoa, you're really
No.
you're
No,
there before the web."
I first encountered the internet in '92 when I was a freshman at Utah State, and I just never looked back. It was the most amazing thing that I had ever seen. Like I could just communicate with whoever, wherever, whenever, and I was, and it's actually how I met my wife. So yeah, we met before the web even existed. So online.
That's awesome. And I remember those times quite well because I started working at an internet service provider about that time, and then a web development firm, and then went to Compaq and HP, and all just kind of riding that wave of anybody who knows anything about the web could get a job.
Absolutely. Yeah. At the time that I was hired for my first job out of college, they were literally hiring anyone with a pulse. They would train you, they would give you signing bonuses. It was amazing. And now it's completely the opposite.
And people were jumping from company to company. I mean, they would get their sign-on bonus, the recruiter would get their fee, and then, 4 months later, they'd be off to another company.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's kind of how I started out, was just jumping back and forth between different companies till I found a good fit. But yeah.
Yeah. But you're saying now that it's not so much in the web field. Would you say that's just the web or IT in general?
I think that as certain technologies get commoditized and more commonplace, and people just, there's tons of people who do whatever it is, those technologies tend to be in less demand. It's just kind of a demand and supply curve situation. And, web development has matured to the point where it's just, people hardly even think twice about it. It's still hard to do. It's still not very easy. That's why there are still agencies. That's why most people, outgrow their little point and click websites, and they move to something more sophisticated as their business grows or their organization matures. But for the most part, it's kind of a commoditized thing, and lots of people can pick it up very quickly, and there's lots and lots of tools that didn't exist before to make it easier. So yeah, that's kind of where it's gone.
And you have global competition. I mean, literally anybody in the world can learn web development and then sell that service to anybody else in the world.
Yeah, ubiquitous internet connections has changed everything. Earlier it was like people, all over the world turned to like the more modernized countries that had internet, principally the United States to begin with, but later on, the G8 countries, and now just anywhere, you can, and with Starlink coming up, anybody can do anything from anywhere with a connection. So it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I wish the Starlink for RVs came out about 3 years ago, because whenever COVID happened, we could have gotten an RV and driven wherever.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that availability, because then it'll free me up to eventually, travel and do a lot more things and work at the same time if I'm so lucky to be able to do so.
That's awesome. Did you whenever you got into the web work, were you self-taught, or did you have like some courses or something that helped?
I was completely self-taught. Yeah, the university I was attending at that time, which was Southern Utah University, I had transferred after my freshman year to a university closer to my home. And so when I started to go to school there in '96, like early '96, it was still brand new. And there was one college course that they had. It was basic HTML, and nothing much more than that. One of my roommates was actually taking the class, and I looked at his materials. I'm like, this stuff is easy. So I went to the bookstore and figured I'm just going to buy a book on it, see if I want to take this class next semester. And as I got through as I finished the book, I'm like, well, now I know everything that they're teaching him in his class. So I'm just going to start making web pages. And I hung out a shingle, and my first customer was the art gallery on campus. I actually had built also a online forum for connecting people to trade, buy, and sell books, like their used textbooks, because the campus bookstore was stealing money from the students in terms of sellback value. So I did a little black market thing on some stolen web server space that I found on the network of the university. And then from there, I just parlayed that into building for a private investigator, a website for him. And then I was working for the Forest Service, and they needed a website, so I did something for them. And then I did an insurance startup. I began work at an insurance startup, doing all their marketing and their web and their programming, and it just kind of mushroomed from there. I even taught classes to the continuing education department at SUU for like business owners and people who had graduated, or people who were looking to increase their knowledge about whatever topic. I came up with the entire curriculum, and I taught the whole class for 3 days at a time. And so I really got into it.
Now, what kind of tools do you use in terms of the platform? Are you have you like branched down to like Python or PHP development and a full stack web apps and that type of thing?
Not quite so much. I found WordPress to be very useful and helpful at one point in my career to solve some problems at a company I was working for, and decided, hey, this is actually quite useful for a ton of different things. So I kind of really, poured all of my effort and focus into WordPress, which is a content management system that makes publishing on the web super easy. And the more I got into it, the more I just kind of specialized in it, until that's pretty much what I do 24/7, 365 days of the year. I've got something going on with somebody's WordPress site. So I'm not full stack. I'm not really even like a sophisticated front end or back end developer. I know enough code to do the scripting I need to do, or find somebody who can help me out with it, borrow somebody's code, a lot of copy paste programming that I do. But I get the job done, and at the end of the day, most people are happy with what I do. So yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, I use WordPress for countdowntothemoon.org and northhoustonspace.org, and my own little private website too. And it's just amazing, the themes and plugins. I mean, pretty much it feels like more of a systems integrator type of need as opposed to actual development.
Yeah, it is like that. And I even started a local like West Orlando WordPress kind of meetup group. We're actually affiliated with the official WordPress Orlando group. And then we attend the WordCamps when they host those. But yeah, we pull in, I've got about 600 people in this small little group that we have, and we get like maybe 8 to 10 people every first Friday and third Thursday whenever we do our meetups. So
yeah, it's not so much about creating solutions, but finding the right one that fits.
Yeah. And a lot of people turn to it because they know about it. They've heard about it. They'll start out with something like Squarespace or Wix or Page or iPage, or I don't remember what the other one is. But mostly Squarespace and Wix. People will come to us and say, hey, I need to move off of Wix or Squarespace and move into something more sophisticated. And so we help people out, and people hire me to do the same. And so, yeah.
Well, I wanted to talk to you about your interest in space. You mentioned the Hearts in Space project, and I know you were involved with Space Hero at one point, or maybe you're still involved, and you're involved with Mars Initiative. So clear, and just looking at your background, like literally the background behind you, You have an interest in space. Uh, do you have any recollections on when this started for you?
Oh, I would have to, well, okay, so my family has some history in the space program. My grandfather was a master machinist for Hughes Aircraft in Tucson, Arizona, where he raised his family. And so he built parts for the Ranger rovers that were sent to the moon ahead of uh, you know Gemini and Mercury and Apollo and all of that, to kind of just see if they could land there and test the soil and do all kinds of stuff like that. So some of his work is actually sitting on the moon right now. My father was an electrical engineer. He gave me lots and lots of science toys when I was a kid and really fostered my love of science that I didn't know I had until he gave me all that stuff. I grew up in a library surrounded by books. I was attracted to the science books and the space books. So, even though I came a few years after Apollo ended, I was I had my nose buried in one of those books all the time, looking at the pictures and wishing I could be in space, orbiting the Earth, going to the moon, going to Mars, you name it. But yeah, I drew pictures a lot of, spacecraft, and I wrote science fiction stories, little short stories, little kid stories that I would write. Yeah, and I just loved science. I loved space. And then I got a scholarship when I was a junior in high school to study at Utah State University. I was one of 4 students selected out of the whole state, and it was for the Getaway Special Payload team that was building experiments like Hearts in Space to fly on the shuttle and learn about the biology of human beings in microgravity and all that kind of stuff. So our experiment, Hearts in Space, was I think it was one valve of an artificial heart. So part of the research I got to do was to watch an artificial heart transplant into a patient named Garth, who happened to be a cow at University of Utah, which was partnered with Utah State on this. And I got to stand over the surgeon's shoulder as he was, doing the entire operation. And then I got to take in some of the data and record, information so that we could take it back to Utah State and to use it in our experiment, and trying to figure out, how do we measure the hydrostatic pressure inside the heart when, when astronauts are floating around in microgravity. So.
And is your interest in space shared by your family and friends and people around you, or are you kind of unique with your interest?
So I've always tried to get my sons interested, and my daughters, and they've had different levels of interest each time I've kind of brought stuff up, but for the most part, it's just me. Everything to do with space. I even dabble in UFO stuff because the Pentagon coming out and saying that these things are real, we don't know what they are. I'm very, very curious about everything, and I don't really care about stigmas and all that kind of nonsense. I want to go where the data goes, and if the data is showing that there's something interesting, I go look at it, and I try to figure out what it is and how it works. And so, I'm interested in all that stuff. And, my kids, they're, like I said, they're kind of mildly interested in some of this stuff, but it just didn't rub off on them like it rubbed off on me with my parents and everything else. So.
Yeah, your career really took off during the 1990s whenever the internet was booming.
Yeah.
And so I think you're probably in a very good position to appreciate this metaphor or comparison. And I'd like to get your take on it. But I believe that the 2020s are going to be to space what the 1990s were to the internet. I was wondering if that feels about right to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I did not see I figured that eventually space would be commercialized. I thought maybe it would be militarized first and then commercialized, but this recent uptick in commercialization is very, very encouraging, especially to people like me who just didn't end up in the space field that we wanted to be in, but still want to experience space. I think that is something that is much, much more viable in our lifetimes at some point than it ever was before, where government was kind of monopolizing space for its own purposes. I love, the whole thing that SpaceX is doing. I'm a huge fan of SpaceX and whatever Elon Musk is doing with any kind of Starship or Dragon or, Falcon or any of the hardware that he's building. It's just super amazing to watch. And it's what I looked forward to seeing in the future when I was a child. I just didn't know that it was going to take quite this long. um, but yeah, I think that the trend is definitely towards a hyper commercialization of space, mining asteroids, exploring other planets commercially, setting up colonies commercially, even. Yeah, I think that's where we're headed.
I imagine you must have known pretty early on after it was announced, maybe even as it was announced, that NASA is planning to send astronauts back to the moon again for the first time since 1972. Do you remember when and how you found out about that?
About the Artemis program.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, like I said, I follow all things space and I follow NASA's goings on, and I knew about Artemis pretty much when it was first announced. Um, and I was kind of skeptical. I thought, I don't know if they're going to be able to do this, because I was used to being disappointed by grandiose pronouncements of, we're going to be doing this by this year and this by this year. None of that ever happened. So I was just like, yeah, sure, okay, we'll see when that happens. We're a lot closer to that now, and I'm actually happy to see that. I'm happy to be wrong. So I do think that maybe NASA could have gone a different route, as far as, instead of being in the rocket business, they needed to be more in the exploration business and like commercialization of space take over the rocketry stuff. And I think they have done that, of course, with SpaceX and Boeing. But I think that just the timelines kind of merged funny, so where Artemis was already had that momentum, and then SpaceX came in with as a surprise, and they're like, okay, well, we'll just keep doing Artemis. But I think eventually, they're just going to have to switch over to commercial space to really do what they need to do.
Yeah, I mean, the SLS and Orion's gotten too far along not to do something with it.
Right. It's a sunk cost fallacy, which NASA, unfortunately, is really good at. The shuttle was one of those. I love the shuttle. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a beautiful machine and amazingly complex and wondrous piece of hardware, but it was expensive, and it was a lot of PR for not a lot of bang for the science buck, not as much as it could have been. I think if we had continued the Apollo program with the Saturn V and whatever else came after that, we would already be living on the moon and on Mars. We just lost focus and we kind of went a different direction. So,
would it surprise you that of the random people that I interview, like at Starbucks and at the mall and on the street and people sitting next to me on the airplane and wherever, that only about 20% of them know that we're going back to the moon?
that would not surprise me in the slightest. Yeah.
Do you think that's a problem, or does it matter?
I think it's a problem in terms of lack of awareness or just general knowledge of current events. I think most people are just kind of stuck in their little rut with their blinders on, and they kind of go through daily life just worried about their own concerns, which is understandable. I mean, people have been saying since the early space program, why do we need this? Why do we need this? What do we care? But I think, now that it's so commonplace and now that's kind of taken for granted, it's easy for people to just not know, because they just won't follow it. Even though it's right in front of them, they'll just scroll on by on their phone or whatever. But as far as like advancing humanity, I would love to see more people more informed and more involved with space. I'd like to boost that 20% that you mentioned up to 40 at least, just to make sure that people are getting that, hey, without space, you don't have that phone that you're looking at. That didn't come about by accident or just somebody coming up with it on their own. Everything you walk around with and use every single day has some kind of root in, the space program and materials science and everything that we've learned about satellites and how they communicate, on and on and on. It's all intermeshed. So more people understanding that would lead to more curiosity, which would lead to more people entering STEM and being, part of a space program career.
Yeah, I get that a lot whenever I ask people, what they think about us going to space. I get a wide range of options, like we should be, taking care of problems here on Earth instead of spending all that money to go to space. Or I've even heard people say, we've messed up the Earth, we shouldn't mess up the moon too. And then, other people are like, well, the government wastes so much money, they might as well do something inspirational with it.
Mhm.
And then other people see it as being like the pathway to the future of humanity. So it's definitely the whole wide spectrum views out there.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
yeah.
I agree with you totally on that. And I agree with people who say that, as long as the money is being spent, we should spend it on space. That I can completely agree with, because that's, to me, that's the only government program that actually has had a net return, as far as not screwing stuff up, and also giving us something for our money. Like, without the space program, we just don't have the trappings of modern life that we have today. And it really kind of makes me sad that people think, we have so many problems on Earth, we've messed up the Earth. That space travel and space exploration is the solution to those things, because the more we discover about resource usage and the more things we invent because of the space program, the less poverty we'll have, and the more environmental awareness and ability to protect the environment we'll have. When you live in space, you have to make do with everything that you have. You have to, use it up. You have to wear it out. You have to make it do. And if you don't do that, you die. And we can apply the lessons that we learn through settlement of space directly back to Earth. Recycling water, recycling air, recycling any kind of waste, using resources, mining the resources from the asteroid belt or from other planets instead of our own planet. I mean, there's an endless supply of everything we need out in the solar system, except for certain biomaterials. But even the support materials we need to make the Earth better, those all are out in space. Why would we dig them up from the Earth and destroy habitat and destroy ecosystems for resource mining, when we can get most of it out in the asteroid belt or on other planets? It just makes sense to do it.
Yeah, in fact, if Jeff Bezos, when he talks about space, he really does talk about it in terms of moving those, heavy industry and mining and energy production off of the Earth. And then ideally at some point zoning the Earth so it's like just for life and, residential. Is that sort of, how much of that vision do you relate with?
I relate with a lot of it. I don't know that it's entirely practical to make the entire Earth a kind of a preserve. I think people living on Earth are going to turn to the resources closest to them, because they're going to be, let's face it, those resources that are close to them down here on Earth are going to be a lot cheaper than stuff that we import from space in the near term. But eventually, stuff we import from space, as we reduce the cost of launching and landing, all of those types of factors, those things are going to actually come down to a reasonable level, to where you can make the choice. Hey, I'm gonna source everything I need from outside of our gravity well. I'm going to get those materials from other places so that I'm not impacting my local environment. But I think for the short term, it's going to still be lots of people still using the Earth as their primary resource. It's understandable.
It's true. Of course, I imagine we talked to the Wright brothers back in 1901, or whenever they did their flight, about how many people would be flying in airplanes. I have difficulty imagining today's world.
No, they couldn't have possibly imagined. Maybe they thought someday their planes would get bigger. Maybe they even foresaw them being used in wars or for transportation of goods. But I don't know for sure that they really envisioned, a 747 or a fighter jet or any of the other numberless types of aircraft that we have today. I think they would have been astonished at it. And I think we're going to be astonished, any of us who happen to live long enough to be able to see some of the things that are going to be coming to us in the space programs and such, that we're going to be talking to our kids about things that we remembered seeing. They're gonna be like, wow, that's like horse and buggy.
Yeah, and even like the worldwide penetration and adoption of like the smartphone, iPhones and Androids.
Yeah.
I think pretty much everybody in the world that has a phone. It feels like.
Yep.
And if SpaceX is able to create a completely reusable, rapidly reusable rocket that greatly lowers the cost, I also think it's very hard for us to imagine the repercussions of that on this site too.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just going to be mind-blowing. I do actually hope for a future, at least in my lifetime, that they've been talking about the physical feasibility, the laws of physics actually being supportive of a warp drive. You know, that kind of thing just really gets me excited as a Star Trek fan, and just, you know, space opera kind of stuff in general. The idea of moving essentially faster than light and being able to leave our solar system and go to other planets is just amazing to me. And again, there's a lot of big obstacles and a lot of, you know, seemingly impossible things to solve before we get there, but the math works out, and that's encouraging. Like, that tells us that there's a possibility, you know.
Yeah, I keep thinking of, we keep launching these ships to other stars, and our technology keeps improving. So like the newest ship gets there first, and
Yeah,
it's basically a progressive history that arrives afterwards.
yeah, I remember reading a science fiction novel. I wish I could remember the author's name. It was a woman. I think it. What was it called? I'll have to look it up later. But it was about kind of that same thing. And without giving spoilers, you know, it talked about it. It kind of had the issue of what happens when your generation starship gets lapped by advanced propulsion, you know, vehicles that that are launched, you know, 40, 50, 100 years later. You know, what about the people that spent, you know, many lifetimes trying to arrive at, you know, Alpha Centauri or Bernard Star or whatever? You know, what do we tell those people? Do we rescue them, or we just let them keep going, you know?
I know. They're like, oh, we thought this would be unoccupied, and here
Right.
everything's like there's no space. It's all Manhattan, like the entire planet.
We've been traveling for 400 years collectively, and we get there and it's already all the space is gone. You know, there's no home, there's no housing, because it's all just filled up. It's like, great.
Or even better yet, we have some type of really quirk in our legal system where
Yeah.
those people actually have some type of claim over the planet, and then they arrive and are like infinitely wealthy at that point.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. Like, you know, who gets claimed? The people who left to get to it first, or the people who got there first? Exactly.
Um, well, if it was safe and affordable, would you take a trip to space?
Do you even have to ask? Absolutely, in a heartbeat. I wouldn't even have to think about it. I mean, who wouldn't? If you're anything like me, you would jump at that chance, and I definitely would. Like you mentioned earlier, I've been a part of the Space Hero Insiders program that I mentioned. You know, I've applied to pretty much every contest since I first saw one advertised to send a civilian winner to the moon. It was in a copy of Omni magazine from, I think, 1986. And I wrote my little letter. I said, I'm this many years old, and I really want to go to space, you know, and never heard back from that, obviously, because it was kind of a gimmick to get you to send your address in so they could send you, you know, Columbia Record Company or something kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I applied for Dear Moon. I was going to apply for Who Wants to Be an Astronaut, just didn't get a chance to finish that up. I mean, just any chance I get, I'm going to be definitely trying to do that. And I think it's possible, you know, with Starship. Once Starship gets up and running, and they've worked out everything and systematized everything to the point where the failure rate is, you know, just phenomenally low. You're going to see people just, you know, using that as like 1 hour transport to anywhere on the planet. I'll be lined up. I know that. You know, I'll save up my money, and I'll be one of the early passengers on that for sure. You know, trips around the moon will not be out of the question, you know, for a lot of just regular civilians. And that's what it needs to be. It needs to be democratized. It can't just be government people, you know, highly trained astronauts. It eventually has to become about all of humanity being able to access low Earth orbit, lunar orbit, Mars, anywhere that humans can possibly go.
Yeah. How far would you go to orbit, to the moon? Would you immigrate to Mars?
I've had this discussion with my family. Actually, it's kind of funny, even though it's you know, more academic than not these days. My wife is actually surprisingly supportive. She loves to have me around, and I love to be around her. And I also have this love of space, and it's this constant tug of war. Like, you know, if I were able to go to Mars, would I? If I had enough money to be able to pay my ticket there, and then, you know, work off my ticket back, like kind of what they're saying they might do, would I do it? Well, you know, that's easily 3 years of my life or more, that I would be on another world. Would I be able to return and have a normal, healthy life? What about radiation exposure and low gravity? Would I be able to manage, the recuperation once I got back? Lots and lots of questions. It's easy to say, yeah, I'd go, but there's a lot to consider in a decision like that. And even though it's still academic, I think about it a lot. I think, wow, what if there was a breakthrough and I was able to go? Would I do it? I would have a hard time not doing it. I would definitely want to go for sure.
So is your wife as gung-ho as you are, or is there some convincing that would need to happen before y'all go to Mars?
Convincing. She's not as into space as I am. She knows that I love it, and she loves that I love it, and she's supportive of that. She's very much down to earth. She's very much, I have enough on my hands here with my kids. I don't need to be going traipsing out into the solar system. Space is kind of scary, which I totally get. It is kind of scary, but I'm all for it. So yeah, for her, I'm happy that she's happy that I'm happy. So yeah.
I was thinking of a kind of a fringe dating site for people who are looking to eventually immigrate to Mars, trying to make sure they're like set up early on for that.
Wow, that's actually an awesome idea. We need to have everybody who watches this sign an NDA.
Because I would love to see something like that created. I'm already married. In fact, I'm about to have my 25th year marriage anniversary, and my wife is already talking about that she might be willing to go with me or let me go, or one of the two. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. She's willing to let me go, even though it would complicate things and we'd be sad being apart. But she's always been supportive of me in that regard, and she knows that it's been a big dream of mine and that I kind of missed that path earlier in our life. Just trying to provide for a family. It was hard to pin my hopes to becoming to my original career goal of being a payload specialist on the shuttle. That's like one in how many millions of people get to do something like that. I had to be more practical and choose a career that I could actually provide for my family with. But the fact that I'm still relatively young at a time when commercialization is now a thing, who knows? Like, there could be all kinds of opportunities for me. So
I think you're really interested in any particular job in space. I think a flight controller at NASA would definitely be a possibility for you.
I would like to think that, absolutely. I one of the problems that I have, and which kind of affected my career path as well, I discovered in my university years, and my wife actually helped me discover it. I have a condition called dyscalculia. It's a bit like dyslexia, but with numbers, if that makes any sense. I constantly have trouble doing math in my head, any large numbers. Some people can do stuff like that in their head, calculate a tip, or just arrange things in their head to be able to calculate. I have to have paper. I have to have a calculator. I have to have a spreadsheet. I'm not good at puzzles, really. I'm not really good at like really complex logic things. So I have coping habits and stuff like that. But there's nothing that I don't. There's not a lot that I could offer technically in a technical space career. As a janitor, I could totally excel. If somebody in space needs a web page built, I could do that. I might, find there may be careers that we don't even know exist yet that I would still have a chance at doing in space. So I mean, who knows? The sky is literally the limit there. So it's not even.
It's not space. Yeah. I would counter your statement with saying that you are able to be successful with WordPress, which is not the most straightforward thing.
No, it's not. Yeah, if there's a need for WordPress on a Mars colony, I'm your man. I'll do it.
That's awesome. So whenever you think out to the future, like 200 years from now, what do you see?
Oh man, you're familiar with The Expanse, right? The sci-fi Amazon Prime series.
Absolutely.
Oh, what a great show that is. That to me is, for good and for ill, the most accurate prediction I've ever seen of how humankind's future will be in space. I think it nails it. Like, you have the moon, you have Mars, you have the belt, and you have these inevitable conflicts between Earth, moon, Mars, and belt. that I think will unfortunately occur. Because whenever you're talking about resources, resource extraction, resource use, resources sales, whether it be from asteroids or on Earth or other planets, it's going to lead to some kind of conflict. Unfortunately, that's just human nature. I don't think that's something you can, cheerlead people out of. I think people sometimes are inherently selfish or inherently blind to the needs of others. But I hope beyond hope that we can be peaceful about it, that we don't militarize yet another piece of humanity, that we can kind of say, okay, out here in the solar system, we're all friends. There's plenty for everyone. There's no need to crowd and hurt people, but like I said, there are resources in the solar system that all of humanity could use, and it's just, we could never use all of it in millions of years. Like, there's no need for greed or tearing each other apart. So yeah, I think that we would be something like the Expanse, hopefully peaceful.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that we're like expanding out, and especially we find like some type of gateway that lets us get to all sorts of different stars.
Absolutely.
That's like Interstellar, but on steroids.
Yeah. I mean, anything is possible. I mean, this universe is so huge. I mean, it's just incomprehensibly huge. And statistically, a lot of things can happen that we just aren't even thinking that could happen. And a wormhole in our near vicinity of some kind, or a gateway that an advanced civilization had built, billions of years before us, all of it, to me, I have a big imagination. I have a big ability to take in kind of new ideas and new theories without immediately rejecting them because of some kind of materialist philosophy or loyalty to some materialist ideal. I think there's just like, in Hamlet, there are more things dreamt of there are more things in this universe, or whatever, however the quote goes, in, are dreamt of in your philosophies, Horatio. It's just, there's so many different things that could be out there. We just can't limit our thinking to, oh, it's only more rocks and dust. There's got to be more. And it would not surprise me in the least to find out that someday there are actually other more intelligent beings that have been living here among us that we've never seen. I mean, again, the universe is huge. There's tons of possibility, and we could, essentially go out to the stars if some of that technology were shared with us.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I think like 200 years ago, we didn't know about electromagnetism.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea of actually, I can talk on this device,
Yeah,
and then you could be in the middle, not hear, feel, see anything. And somebody on the other side, you can hear me perfectly. I mean, what kind of dark magic is that?
yeah, exactly. That's exactly my point to people who say, well, there can't be other life, or if there is, they can't be that advanced. It's like, just look at what we've done in the past 50 years. Like, go back 50 years and show somebody a cell phone. They will think it's dark magic. They will think it's some kind of alien device that was brought here from another world. And even better, go to some, primitive culture that has barely seen other humans, show them some of this stuff. Shoes. I mean, anything that is more modern than they are is going to look like magic, and it's going to look like something just otherworldly. And, we're so kind of inured to our own modernization that we can't imagine something bigger than that trumping our understanding of how things work.
Yeah, I mean, on one thing, you have like the cell phone, the satellites, GPS. But on the other hand, you have the way schools are ran, the way we wash and fold and dry clothes. I mean, innovation is very spotty. It's not, time may be a required ingredient, but there's definitely other ingredients that you got to have in order to actually see progress.
Oh, absolutely. You have to have ingenuity. You have to have education. You have to have a drive and a desire to invent and innovate. I love innovation. At one company I worked at, they had an innovation program, and I made it a kind of a internal corporate hobby of mine to really just do anything I could to help innovate. I think innovation is something that we don't encourage enough of. letting people just free associate without without telling them, well, that's physically impossible, you can't do that. Well, let's not say that. Let's pretend that it isn't, and let's see what solutions we can come up with to get to that. And if we can't, we can't. I mean, maybe there's limitations to how humans think and what we can do. But again, there's more to science than just the five senses, the physical world that we inhabit. There's more to science than just repeating experiments and getting the same result. Sometimes you have to go out on a limb and do crazy stuff and figure things out. And even if you don't figure out your original goal, you're going to find out some new things you didn't think were possible either. I'm a big fan of Nikola Tesla. I mean, in his day, he was the mad scientist of mad scientists. Like, nobody knew what the guy was doing. Like, what are you talking about? Talking through the air at long distance without any wires? What is this radio thing you're talking about? Or, sending electricity through the air? Like, how? Just letting people run rampant with their imaginations, you're going to find a lot of different innovations come out of that.
That's true. I guess the thing is, we innovate where we see the opportunity and where we're unwilling to accept the status quo. But there's a lot of areas where we're quite okay with the status quo and no innovation occurs there.
Yeah. Well, and like the saying goes, necessity is the mother of invention, and space is going to create the ultimate necessity, because once you leave the confines of Earth, the friendly confines of Earth, you're dead in seconds for many, many different reasons. And you've got to innovate your way out of those situations. Just like, Mark Watney on, oh, dang it, I forgot the name of the movie.
The Martian.
The Martian, yes. I was thinking that Mars attacks. That's not right, but it did attack him. But yeah, like, he's going to science the SH out of this, and that's what we have to do when you're in space. You have to use science. You have to use your wits. You can't solve problems in the same ways that you do here on Earth. And that leads to further innovation. And again, that goes back to my point that I always tell people, yes, we need space, because if we don't take advantage of the lessons we can learn in space, we have an abundance bias. We have everything we need here on Earth, and we can set up all the Mars analog astronaut situations we want, but we still have, at the end of the day, if things go wrong, I can take my helmet off and breathe oxygen. On Mars, I can't do that. So I'm going to need some kind of device that converts my CO2 back to oxygen, or I can scoop some dirt off of the Martian surface and dump it into a little bag, and that it extracts the oxygen that I need and puts it back in my tank. There's got to be ways to recharge your resources that we're just not going to come up with here on Earth. We won't be thinking in that direction.
Yeah, I just kind of get a little bit more details on your vision of 200 years from now. Do you think we will have colonies on Mars in 200 years?
If we don't, I'll be very disappointed. I think I'm right along with Elon Musk when he says we've got one shot at this. Like, we're at the point where we're at an inflection point where if we don't do this now, we probably never will. If we don't colonize or settle out into the solar system at this point in our history, we'll probably be filtered out of existence, because we just will not have, striven enough to move out into the solar system and become an interplanetary species. If we don't do that, the next asteroid that threatens Earth, that'll be the end of it. That's humanity done, right? We don't want that. We want to be able to continue our upward progression out into the solar system and into the galaxy if we can. So I think if we don't have a colony on Earth or on Mars in 200 years, we never will. And it's very, very important we get to do that.
And just a few other questions about where you see humanity in 200 years. It's kind of hard to think about, but do you think there'll be more people in 200 years, or less people, or the same amount?
Doing what?
Just existing in the solar system.
Oh, in the solar system? Yeah, there'll be more. I think at some point we'll at least get to the moon. And I think there'll be more people in terms of that, living on the moon, not than on Earth, but a lot more people than currently, which is 0. But, in say 10 years, we'll have maybe 8 astronauts living on the moon, but maybe in another 100 years, it'll be 800 people. This stuff is hard. It's a long slog. It's, we got to figure stuff out, and it's resource intensive, and we have to figure out how to get better propulsion to get things off of Earth. The mass to lift ratio is just punishingly brutal. So we have to figure out better ways to launch things and make use of the resources we have when we get there, you know. But I think it can be, you know, within 100 years, maybe 800, maybe 8,000 people living on the moon. Who knows?
But I was kind of talking more about the total human population. Elon Musk is, you know, a big fan about talking about, you know, the collapse in the birth rate, how as people become more wealthier, they have less children. A lot of people have no children or just one child.
Yeah.
And from his standpoint, he's like, you know, people may be living longer, and society is going to move further into the older demographic.
Right.
But I mean, do you think that trend will continue and we'll actually see a population decline, or do you think, I mean, like, how do you see that working out?
Well, here on Earth, I see there definitely being a population decline. I think we do limit our numbers. We've kind of been conditioned to think, yeah, you know, there's 8 billion people on the Earth. We need to reduce those numbers. But I think Elon has done the math right. And I'm going to be unpopular for saying this. I'll probably, I don't know what the comments are going to be here on this video, but it's when you take everything into account, you know, you have to reproduce beyond the replacement value. You have to have more than you and your spouse exist, right? So you have to create more than you are. And I think we are going to see a population decrease on Earth, partially from just people not reproducing and choosing different lifestyles, but also from war, famine, disasters of various types, you know, illnesses that can come up that are long-term or that affect multiple populations over the long term. When it comes to space, unfortunately, it's going to be even more difficult because you're spending most of your time trying to stay alive to begin with, which is hard. So you're not putting enough energy into reproduction. And even if you did, you would fill up that space, that limited space that you can control the environment of. You're going to fill up that space quick. And so you need to keep creating more space. Say on Mars, you're going to have to create more habitats for more people. That's resource intensive. It's not like on Earth where you can just, you know, have kids and then just, you know, find a piece of land and cut down some trees and build a cabin. It doesn't work that way on Mars or on the moon. So, you know, it's going to be even harder to raise the population rates on, you know, off of Earth. So I think on Earth, we need to figure out the math of this better and stop making policies that limit our population, because even though it sounds like we have a surplus of humans right now, which we arguably could say we do as far as resources, when you look at the total land mass of Earth and how if you distributed everything more evenly, everybody could have acres of their own land and still have some to spare. It's just, how do we get there, and how do we make arable land, you know, or land that isn't arable more arable? How do you get fresh water? How do you get, you know, all the resources that people need to live distributed evenly across the planet? A lot of people, the biggest populations live in these enormous cities, and then like if you go to Wyoming or Texas or Alaska, there's just all this land and all this space. So the Earth is not in danger of being overpopulated from there's not enough space for everyone. It's more about, you know, kind of redistributing those resources more equitably and in better, more efficient ways.
Yeah, and indeed. Do you think, I mean, okay, so if you had to make a guess, and it could be even a range, when do you think the first baby born off of Earth might be? How far away do you see that?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would guess somewhere within the next 50 to 100 years. And even though it could be earlier than that, I think it would be inadvisable until we have more data on how human biology functions long-term in low gravity or microgravity or no gravity. Living on Mars and having children medically is just completely uncharted territory. We just don't know how the human body works well enough in low gravity environments to know, you know, how will the fetus develop? How will the heart of the mother and the fetus develop? Will there be enough nutrients to be able to sustain both the mother and the child? You know, do we resort to artificial wombs to kind of compensate for, you know, the drains on the human system, you know, calcium depletion from the bones and enlargement of the heart, and, you know, problems with kidneys and, distribution of fluids in the body, do we maybe resort to kind of an artificial womb to kind of reproduce that way? Who knows? I mean, but I think within 50, maybe to 100 years, we'll have figured out a bunch of that stuff to be able to say, okay, let's do a limited trial of couples having children on other planets and see what happens.
Mm. And in 200 years, do you see us having more countries or fewer countries or the same number of countries?
Good question. Well, I do follow politics quite a bit. I do see a trend toward wanting to have more of a UN-centric control over things, kind of like in The Expanse, where it's more one Earth united and no borders kind of a situation. To me, that's a little bit starry-eyed. It's a little too Star Trek for my practical tastes. I think people are still going to have territories and borders, culture, language, things that they want to defend, that they want to keep their kind of little enclave. We do this naturally. We're as humans, we're tribal. We follow a group that we know that can protect us and that can keep us from being killed. And help us to get the resources we need. So we kind of glom together in these groups, and you see it in any social setting. You can remove every other variable and humans will still clump together in cliques and groups and regions and nations. And I don't see any reason why that wouldn't continue. So I think we're still going to have at least the same number of nations, maybe a few less, maybe if some of them unify and erase their borders. That could happen, but I don't see us getting rid of nation states entirely. It's not practical enough for me.
And in 200 years, you see us having more currencies or fewer or the same, like more mediums of exchange?
Well, in terms of traditional money, I see us going towards a cashless society with a single currency, or at least one or two or three currencies. But there's the wild card of crypto. Which is a completely other paradigm. It's a completely different way of looking at money. So with the number of emails that I get today, hey, we just launched a new coin. It could be hundreds and thousands of different currencies by within the next 10 to 15 years, all of them vying for some kind of value among their users. But I think in terms of the traditional cash society that we've had, that's going away. And I think we're going to move towards a single currency worldwide on that front.
How about languages?
Languages, I've been in enough countries to see, disappearing languages. And languages have disappeared for thousands of years. There are languages that people spoke 1,000 years ago that we'll never even know about, because they went extinct 1,000 years ago. Language is so fluid, and it's not something you can nail down and have just be one thing. Even if we mandated English or German or Spanish or French or some other mainstream language as the universal world language, people would play tricks on us. They would, English is fluid itself. The English I speak today is nothing like the English my great grandfather spoke. He wouldn't understand half of what I'm talking about, or my kids. It's constantly moving and changing, as geographic boundaries change, as people change, as culture changes. So, I don't think we can narrow it down to just one language at any point. I think we're going to have lots of different languages over time. I think we're going to lose those dialects that were more like the more indigenous dialects, First Peoples dialects. Those are eventually, sadly, going to go away. But we will have, at least 10 major languages at some point that people will speak.
I was listening to this podcast about Chinese and how it changed over time. And, the question is, what's the difference between a dialect and a language? And the difference is a language is a dialect with a Navy and an Army.
Yeah, you're not right. That's exactly right. That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
So I'd like to turn the lens around a little bit. So we were looking out into the future through the telescope about what 200 years might be. But let's say you or one of your descendants actually immigrates to Mars.
Yeah.
And it's 200 years in the future, and it's your great granddaughter. She's finally in high school. She's in a history class. And just like we might have students today who are doing a research paper about the 1820s, for some reason, she's doing a paper about the 2020s.
Sure.
What would you hope? So give you a lot of latitude with this, but we still have 8 more years to go. What would
Mhm.
you hope she could write about this decade?
Wow. I I would hope that she would be able to write something positive, kind of about the whole overall effort that led to her living in her situation and where humanity is interplanetary. I would hope that there would be something that she could say, wow, the 2020s were really when it began. My great 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 grandfather or whatever contributed this or whatever to that. And it depends on which, multiple great grandfathers we're talking about. It's a kind of a, it expands. It wouldn't just be me, there'd be thousands of us at that point. But I think it would be cool if she was writing something about pushing boundaries, continuing to explore the solar system. Maybe by that point we'll have gone out into the galaxy and maybe, who knows, the universe. But and I think what I would really really like, if I ever manage to finish any of the space related science fiction novels I've tried to write over the years, I'd hope that if she has a copy of that, she would use that and compare and contrast my vision of what her future, what the future that she's living in would be with everything that she's actually in, and just write about what I got right, what I got wrong. If I could be a fly on the wall to see that, that would be amazing. Just to see, did I get close? Did I understand the trajectory correctly, or was I way off?
It's probably like what you were saying about the future being unimaginable. It's, but
Yeah, no, go
go
ahead.
ahead. You said something else that I never even considered. I keep asking that question.
Yeah.
What would your great 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 granddaughter, potentially write about the 2020s? And I always envisioned it as being a one-to-one link. It's
Yeah,
very possible that great 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 granddaughter may actually be related to every single one of the people I've interviewed.
it's possible. It depends on what happens on Earth too. It depends on if there's a population, implosion. She could trace her lineage back, and it would just be a bottleneck at some point. I do a little bit of genealogy. My wife does a ton. She loves doing genealogy. Little plug for her. If anybody needs genealogy done, let me know in the comments. But yeah, it's very interesting to think that when I look back through my genealogy, I look at a fan chart and I see hundreds of ancestors, and she could pick from any one of those hundreds. It could be any number of cultures and languages and races of people that she descends from, or it could be a very tiny few if we have a population implosion. Who knows?
So, whenever you look at your ancestors from the 1820s, do you have an idea on how many of them there are?
Oh, gosh, I'd have to go back and count again. It depends on like how many you can actually track down. You can actually calculate it. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but you can calculate it. There's calculators online to say, how many great grandfathers do you have? How many great 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 grandfathers do you have, et cetera. I'm going to guess probably, oh, I'd hate to guess because somebody's going to call me out on this, 100. It goes, I go back to like the mid 1700s on one line and the 1200s on another. It's just all over the place.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Rob, those are pretty much all the questions I had. Was there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
Not really. I just, if I could do like a closing statement of what we've kind of, and just to wrap this up. If I had one thing to say to anybody listening to this, be curious. Like, use your mind as a garden and grow as many things as you possibly can. Some things will die, some things will thrive, some things will do kind of okay. But use your imagination. Let your inhibitions go. We have a very rigid schooling system. I favor a homeschool or even an unschool system for most children because they're curious. They want to go explore. They want to they want a lot of recess time so they can go and look at bugs or whatever. Let's get them off their phones and off of their devices for a bit. Let them go outside. Like I had a childhood like that where I was outside as much as I could possibly be. It's one of the reasons I love science, because I was always finding new things and trying to figure them out. And just be curious and read. Take notes on what you read. I have a daughter who does that. She uses various note keeping apps on her iPad, and she just digs into literature and she pulls out all the nuggets and everything, and she joins trivia contests to broaden her horizons. And I want to see every human doing that. We have so much potential, but we waste it so much in just routine dumb stuff. TikTok, or I don't, if you like TikTok, great. It's not for me. There's people who love, I've been on social media. I've worked in the social media field. I'm not a Luddite, but there's so many better things we can do with our time. Let's read, let's experiment, let's build things, make things, do things. And I think it'll rekindle in us a desire, that innate desire to explore, to push our boundaries and find out more and do more with ourselves than we have been doing. So that's, if I had to just wrap it up, that's what I would say to people.
That's awesome, Rob. I totally agree with you. And it was such a pleasure to get to talk to you. So thank you so much for participating.
And I admire your work. I've been watching you from afar for a bit here, and I feel very privileged to be selected for an interview. This is great.
And if you know anybody else that would feel fortunate to be selected for an interview, when I'm traveling with my wife and she's like, have you interviewed somebody today? And she's like, who's the victim? I'm like, no, they're like the lucky winner. It's like winning the publisher clearinghouse. It's like, anyway. So.
Totally. Yeah. You should keep doing this even after it's all done. I think humanity can benefit this. Take a break for a little while, give your family some rest from this stuff. But yeah, this is awesome. I love it.
Well, awesome. Well, you have a good rest of your evening, Rob, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.